Often, our greatest challenges become the very thing that leads us to our purpose. What seemed like an impossible situation for Kristin Kurtz was actually the setup for her to step into her calling. If you didn't listen to part 1 yet, stop here and go back. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happened that led her to this point. Now in part 2, Kristin's going to share how she took what could have broken her and instead used it to serve others in a powerful way. Welcome back to It's Your Story to Tell. Let's dive in, Kristin, to the next chapter of your journey.
Yeah, so I knew it was time to go, and 11/1/21 was actually my day to take a huge leap. I felt like I was taking, if you guys can imagine with me, I'm a very visual, like I get a lot of visions and dreams, and I imagined myself literally jumping off a cliff with a backpack, knowing that the parachute would come out, but I didn't know that there was a parachute. Like I knew there was one, but I didn't know for sure if it would pop out. And so I'll never forget, I went back into the office to collect all my belongings, and there was a person that was walking into the corporate campus, and I stopped him and I said, "Hey, would you take a picture? I need to document this moment." And I literally did this, like jumping in the air, like I'm free, like free at last, because I love, the eagles and soaring. And I just felt like I was literally being released out of this cage of complacency. I call it like the corporate cubicle cages personally, because I had a cubicle, so, and that was very constricting for this girl who loves adventure and freedom. So I gather my things, and if anybody's ever heard of a prophetic jewelry company called Crowning Jewels, I had ordered myself just a commemorative, celebratory little pendant, and it was delayed. And it actually, I got home from getting all my stuff. I got home, opened my mailbox, and it was there. And there was a postcard that said "Brave Obedience," and it had a whole word personally for me. I was just like, okay, like, and I knew that like this was the right step. I just didn't know what it would look like. So we're over 3 years since leaving. It's been a bumpy ride. I'm not going to lie. I don't talk a lot about, like publicly, I don't talk a lot about the ins and outs of what's happened. I'm one who, like, if life could just be rainbows and butterflies, I would really like that. Right?
Oh,
And I'm sure everybody would, right?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we know that that's
We
not
live in a fallen world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And we're called to stand in this fallen world, which adds a whole nother layer of complexity.
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of miracles along the way, and I've been a life coach. I was trained up as a Christian life coach back in 2017, and was able to work with some people as I was working full time, but not to the capacity that I have now. And I called it like ninja coaching, working in, I was doing that while I was working corporate. I was asking questions, seeing people get freedom and deliverance in that setting, just not in the fullness of what it looks like now. And so my heart, when I was asking these questions and working in that space, knowing what I knew, that I wasn't fully living out my calling, and I wasn't fully living out the assignment. I mean, I was there because he called me to. It's not like how there's that, for me, it was that there's more. Like there's more than this. Like I just had this cry inside of me, like there's more. And when I would ask people questions, even working there, I'm like, so like, what is your dream? And what do you love to do outside of work? And I kept getting a lot of answers like, well, I don't really dream, or I don't do anything fun. Like I'm always working. So then I get home and I'm tired. And then Friday comes and I'm tired. And then Sunday comes and I have anxiety because I don't want to go to work. And I remember that very clearly. So now I have a really, I love to just say, I love to help, women soar in their calling and roar with their voices, because that's been the very place that's been under attack in my own life with the calling and the voice. So I've seen miracles along the way. I've seen creative miracles provisionally come along the pathway. I've also seen the the jar run very dry. I've seen just this, like, Lord, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't
Yeah.
make sense on paper, right? This doesn't look like how I thought it would look. And that's where, and I'm even in the midst of that season again right now, where it can be really challenging. There's this lie that is actually coming for me right now that, oh, you might as well just go back and get a job because it's not, panning out like you thought it would. And it is a lie from the enemy, truly, because he is calling me to stay on this. It is a very narrow path. It is a very, very narrow path to be pioneering and trailblazing. And literally, like, I will say, for my own family, like, I am a breaker and I'm going through a lot of breaking to get to the breakthrough. Because
Yeah.
I am standing in the gap for a new generation, for my children, and I would go so far as to say for my husband, because he's a pre-believer. My heart is like, Lord, bring the miracles so my husband can see you doing this, not me trying to like conjure up the things, but that he would see how, like, because for me it doesn't make sense on paper.
Yeah.
At all.
Mm-hmm.
So
It really never does when we're
it
called,
doesn't. Right.
As I've walked this journey early on, it was like major attacks. And I was just like, wait a second. I said yes.
Mm-hmm.
I thought if I say yes and I do what you're asking and calling, like, it's going to work out. It's going to be easy.
Yeah.
And he's like, where did you get that theology?
I know.
Like, where was that belief? Because if you read the Bible, everyone who was called faced a lot of persecution and hard things. It took a lot to start getting my mind wrapped around that and accepting that I was actually walking in to battle. Like, put the combat boots on. This is getting hot and hard. And this is where you have to stand even stronger because you are breaking off things generationally. And the enemy does not want freedom, right? I mean, if you are using your voice and you are shining light in the darkness, you are his worst enemy, and he wants to come for you, your children, your family, because he wants to do anything to silence you.
Yeah.
And I remember at just the launch of It's Your Story to Tell and the podcast, and it was getting where it was just so overwhelming. And I was just like, I don't want to do this. He's like, if you don't do this, you are not going to see freedom. You are not going to see it in your family. Like, you pressing through, because sometimes we can think, well, things are going bad and I need to divert my attention and I've got things over here with my kids and all of this stuff because it doesn't make sense in the natural. And people are looking at you like, who are you sharing your voice when, like, you've got all this other stuff in your life? And it's like, I'm just doing what I'm called to do.
Yeah.
And being obedient. And I have watched God be faithful in his provision, but it has not been easy. It has been the hardest time of my life, and I've been through a lot. But what I do have is peace. Before we got on here, we were talking about, getting in the boat. There's all these waves crashing, and Jesus is sleeping. And he wants to invite us into that same level of faith and peace in our own life, that we will get to the other side, that he does have a plan in all of this. And, sometimes we think, gosh, I'm doing all these right things. Like, can you make my pieces line up to, not be so hard? But we forget that we're only one piece on that chessboard.
Yeah.
And he sees where everybody needs to be moved in order for everybody to be in relationship and blessed with him. And so we
Yeah.
have to understand that sometimes we have to get out of God's way,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
And just
yeah.
do what he says, and then
Yeah.
trust and obey. There's no other
Hmm.
way. I don't know, to
I love
be
that.
happy in Jesus,
Hmm.
I think it's the song. I mean,
Hmm.
this is like an
Hmm.
old song that's
Yeah.
coming to my mind, an old
Hmm.
hymn, but
Yeah.
just that when that is the place of safety,
Yeah.
even though in the world it feels like the most unsafe,
Hmm.
it's not true. And that's a
Yeah.
lie from the enemy. And so I'm just so proud of you for
Hmm.
going to battle and
Hmm.
honoring the Lord with your choices. And
Hmm.
I just release blessing over
Oh,
you
thank
and
you.
all of the people that you touch, because
Hmm.
God does not look at things monetarily in the same way we do, right?
Yeah.
He tells us that he provides, for the birds and the flowers and all of that. And, you know, nothing against Dave Ramsey. I think it's
Yeah.
amazing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because we should be responsible with our resources, but not at the expense of not being obedient to God.
Exactly.
And when he tells us that he will provide for us every day, that is
Hmm.
so uncomfortable
Yeah.
when you have grown up in like how to be financially responsible. This is how you do accounting. This is how you invest.
Right.
This is how you do all these things. And you're like,
Yeah.
wait, the two can't coexist right now. What do I
Right.
do?
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, you got to choose obedience
Yes.
and let him provide daily. And that is
Hmm.
very, very uncomfortable.
It can be very uncomfortable. Yes.
But it's the only way to see miracles, and it's
Yeah.
the way that God gets all the glory, because
Hmm.
it's not by my mind or my strength, it's only by his power. And so
Hmm.
you are standing there in his power, and that is the most exciting place to be,
Yeah.
because of what it's going to release is
Hmm.
way more valuable than any
Yeah.
401k
Exactly.
savings account.
Yeah.
We're talking eternal here. And
Yes.
so I just wanted to speak that encouragement over you. I'm saying it over myself too.
Yeah.
Like, remember
Exactly.
this, remember the
Yes.
promises,
Yes.
because um, it really takes a strong mindset. And,
Hmm.
when I started my healing journey, the Lord was so clear on,
Hmm.
you have to take your thoughts captive
Huge.
and measure them up against
Hmm.
who he is and what his word says,
Hmm.
because there's the natural and there's the supernatural.
Yeah.
And as I expanded and started to even question some of the things religiously that I learned that were really keeping me in bondage and chains, because I wasn't embracing all of the giftings of
Yeah.
the Holy Spirit and
Yes.
stepping into that, I was like, whoa, this is a whole new crazy
Yeah.
adventure.
Yes.
I think people are going to think I'm crazy,
Mhm.
but it has
Mhm.
been so amazing to just see how
Mhm.
God has shown up.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. Even today, I was doing some journaling, um, because I actually did accounting like in corporate realms for 20 years. So, um, concrete numbers and analytical things. Like I have a brain for that, but then I
mhm,
also have a very like wild and free, like, you know, let's just be, you know, the aspect of the non-analytical side. So it's like I've got both, and I've
mhm,
become more of the free spirit, right? But then the analytical will try to like come in and try to make sense of everything. And one thing he was showing me this morning was mind your mindset, because the mind is within
mm,
mindset. And as we're walking through storms, and like I said, I'm walking through a pretty big one right now, for the last couple months. And as I was saying to Megan, I even like I'm very raw right now, and he's
Mm,
really doing another like refining work in me because there's things that need to be stripped away. Back in 2018, I was kind of stepping into this, like, I was like, wow, I have prophetic gifting. And people looked at me like at the church I was going to, they're like, we don't really do that kind of thing here, So
mm,
it's this whole, transformation. I felt like even back then I was in a cocoon going through this like metamorphosis, and I feel like I'm almost back in the cocoon a little bit again.
mhm,
Like I'm going, okay, this is getting uncomfortable. Like I'm feeling kind of like confined in the cocoon, like something's happening. I'm maybe being
mhm,
liquefied again. If you guys know the process of the caterpillar to the butterfly, I imagine it being very painful, like to literally be liquefied.
yeah.
Maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe there's some numbing agents inside, but it doesn't come without pain. And I think what I've tried to do, and I'll just be honest, is um, I've tried at times to just stuff the emotions because I'm a warrior. Like I really am. Like I am called to be a warrior. I'm called to lead the charge. I'm called to be at the front line. I'm called to be like a general. And sometimes it is hard to just let the tears flow. And I was even crying before we got on here. And I'm like, should we really be doing this today?
Well, just so you
Um,
know, yesterday I was having that moment, like after months of, or, same thing. Like the
mhm.
last from like November till even now, it has been this shakeup.
Yeah.
And what God is showing me is what you had and what you knew in the last season is not the same skills you need going into this. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's really hard for me to let go of something because I'm like, wait, God,
Yeah.
you showed me that. I was supposed to do that. And I get really attached and I get really engaged.
Hmm.
And then it is hard when he's like, it's time to move.
Hmm.
And so then I experience some more discomfort because some of it is my own resistance to being willing to move. And God is just like, you're going next level. Like, this is the process. He showed me like, not every season is fruitful.
Yeah.
You've got to go through pruning and dormancy, like the seasons, right? And
Yeah.
so I just came out of months and months of like really fruitful work.
Hmm.
And it's just like your butterfly where
Hmm.
you're going back into this dormancy, the cocoon. It's
Hmm.
hard,
Hmm.
but that means there's a next level. And we
Yeah.
can only help people as far as we're willing to go ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Because otherwise it's not authentic. That's what's so powerful
Exactly.
about coaching is like
Hmm.
you're literally doing the work
Hmm.
and you're vulnerable about it. You're
Yeah.
sharing it. So people
Hmm.
like, no, there's no
Yeah.
shame in this hard
Right.
season.
Yeah.
And you're going to grapple with it. Like that
Hmm.
is that is just the way this goes if you want to keep going after the dream that God put in your heart. And I love that you talked about dreams. I
Yeah.
am a big dreamer
Hmm.
and ask a lot of why questions, which it's hard for people to understand that sometimes and it can be
Yeah.
really uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but it is so fun. And I
Yes.
believe that God placed dreams in
Hmm.
all of us. And
Hmm.
that longing that you were for more,
Yeah.
that's because he's calling you to more,
Yes.
right? You were
Absolutely.
created for more. And so he has
Hmm.
to prepare you then, right? So
Hmm.
you say
Hmm.
yes, and it's like, be careful what
Right.
you say yes to because, a
Yeah.
long time ago, someone said, don't pray for patience because what
You
are
have
you going to
to
get? Testing.
learn. Yeah. Yeah.
Pray for grace.
Yes.
But now I'm like, you
Hmm.
know what? I am thankful for
Hmm.
when he walks me through these hards so that I
Yeah.
can learn new skills. And that has been
Hmm.
this season for me. And it sounds like this season
Yeah.
for you too. So
Yeah.
let's see what God
Absolutely.
has next. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited for the next chapter, because, like you said, I feel like I have to walk through to get to breakthrough. And one of the things that I'm so thankful for is people that are in my corner that can speak into, like, I like to call it, part of what I like to say in my coaching is I come alongside you in your but God said. We're not gonna grapple with the but what if. We're not gonna do the plan B, because we have too many people, well-meaning, and I've had some very well-meaning people this last week, but they're not coming in with your but God said. What is your but God said? Because we need to continue on the path. I mean, I think of like Noah's wife, and I'll read about, characters in the Bible, and I just wonder, like, I wonder what Noah's wife was saying to him. Like, what do you think you're actually doing? There's no rain. You're building some big, huge thing that doesn't make sense. And, I always think he must have had a coach on his side too, right? That's just my own imagination.
Somebody cheering him on.
Yeah, because obviously we have the Lord with us, who, I mean, I can't imagine walking this journey without him. I did that. I was saved from addiction when I was 25, and I remember what it was like not having the Lord in my life. And, but we need people who are in our corner, who will help us to keep going, because I have a couple intercessors that are like my Aaron and my Hur, who are in the background. When you're tired, because you're gonna get tired. We all get tired sometimes. To be the ones that are gonna lift your arms and help you to keep going. That's like my favorite phrase. And you guys, it was such a blessing on Friday. I go to Trader Joe's on Friday after my gym time, and I just happened to put the cart away, and it's almost like the Lord like moves my head places to see things. And I just happened to literally, like, I had to turn my head left, and I looked down, and there's this painted rock, and it said, keep going. And there was like a little balloon on, I mean, it was just like this childlike thing, because he calls me a woman of wonder, but I also have like this childlike faith. And it was like he put the rock there for me, but it wasn't just for me. It's for whoever is listening to this today. I do, and it makes me emotional just to even think about it. There's a lot of people giving up, and my heart is that women wouldn't self-abort what it is they're called to birth and bring into this world.
Good.
So good. I don't want to cry anymore.
Crying's okay.
I know.
And it is beautiful that, God does give us little bits of encouragement along the way to help us to know that we're on the right path, and brings people in our lives. You've been one of those for me this past,
I know,
past week. Like, I'm like, God, thank you for just the connection of somebody else who's walking through this season, who we can come along and just encourage each other. So thank you for encouraging our audience today and sharing your story. It's been such a powerful conversation. And listeners, if this episode resonated with you, think of somebody who could use some encouragement and send it to them. Like Kristin said, there are so many people on the verge of giving up on the dream and their God-gifted calling. And we want to stand in the gap and say no, like call them forward. And you can be part of that as the listeners, and allowing the Holy Spirit to speak to you and say, who needs this encouragement? Who needs to hear this story so that they can keep going? So until next time, remember your story has the power to inspire, heal, and transform others in this journey. So thank you, Kristin, for your willingness to share your story. It has been such a blessing. I got your little gift from being on your podcast, and I open it and I'm like, your story matters. Like, oh my goodness, this is like, we were just, God connected us about story, and I just love that. And your story matters, and listeners, your story matters too. We want you to use your voice and make a difference in the world. You were called for such a time as this.
Amen. Yes, go release your sound.
Thanks, Kristin.
Thank you, Megan.